What happens when centuries of royal secrets collide with modern family drama? When a single guard's conscience threatens to expose truths that could shake the very foundation of the British monarchy. In the hallowed halls of Windsor Castle's ancient archives, where dusty manuscripts hold the darkest secrets of kings and queens, a battle is brewing that will determine who controls the narrative of royal history. Queen Camilla thought she had unlimited access to rewrite her legacy, but she never counted on Prince William's fierce protection of his mother's memory, or the courage of one security guard who witnessed something that could change everything. This isn't just another royal family squabble. This is the story of how power, truth, and justice collided in the most unexpected place, leading to a decision so shocking that it sent ripples through every corner of the royal household. A decision that would see a queen consort banned from the very archives she sought to control. The truth always finds a way to surface, even when buried beneath centuries of royal protocol, and sometimes it takes just one person willing to speak up to bring down an entire scheme. Get ready to discover what really happened behind those ancient doors and why Prince William made a choice that stunned the world. The morning fog clung to the ancient stones of Windsor Castle like secrets waiting to be revealed. Thomas Hartwell had been walking these corridors for nearly 15 years as a senior security guard, but today felt different. The weight of what he had witnessed 3 days ago pressed against his chest like a stone, making each breath deliberate and heavy. He adjusted his uniform and checked his watch. 7:30 in the morning meant the Royal Archives would be opening soon, and he knew exactly who would be arriving first. Queen Camilla had been making unusual visits to the restricted sections lately, always accompanied by her private secretary and always with specific requests that seemed to bypass normal protocols. The Royal Archives of Windsor Castle housed more than just historical documents. Within these temperature-controlled rooms lay the personal papers of deceased royals, private correspondence, and sensitive materials that painted a complete picture of the monarchy's most intimate moments. Access was strictly controlled, with even senior royals requiring proper documentation and oversight for certain sections. Thomas had noticed the pattern developing over the past 2 months. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Queen Camilla would arrive with Margaret Thornfield, her private secretary, requesting access to documents related to the late Princess Diana. The request seemed legitimate enough at first. As Queen Consort, Camilla had certain rights to review historical materials, especially those that might relate to her current role or public duties. But what Thomas witnessed 3 days ago had changed everything. He had been conducting his routine security rounds when he heard voices coming from Archive Room 7, the section that housed Princess Diana's personal papers and private correspondence. The door was slightly ajar, which violated protocol. All archive rooms were supposed to remain closed and locked when in use, with security cameras monitoring the interiors. Through the gap, Thomas could see Queen Camilla and Margaret Thornfield hunched over a large wooden table covered with documents. But they weren't just reading. Margaret was holding a small scanner, methodically photographing pages while Camilla sorted through boxes that should have required additional authorization to access. What made Thomas's blood run cold was what he overheard Queen Camilla saying to Margaret, "These letters from Diana to William about the divorce proceedings need to disappear completely. If the public ever reads what she really thought about Charles during those final months, it would destroy everything we've built. Make sure you get copies of everything before we proceed with the removals." Margaret nodded, continuing to scan documents while making notes on a legal pad. "What about the psychiatric evaluations from 1995? The ones where Diana discussed her suspicions about the accident scenarios?" Camilla paused, looking directly at a folder marked with red security tape. "Especially those." "William must never know these exist. If he discovers that his mother had documented her fears about potential threats to her safety, and that Charles knew about them, it could turn him against his father permanently." Thomas had frozen in place, his training warring with his conscience. He was witnessing what appeared to be the systematic removal and possibly destruction of historical documents that belonged not just to the royal family, but to British history itself. More personally, these were documents that Prince William, as Diana's son, might have legitimate claims to review. The scanning continued for nearly an hour. Thomas watched as Margaret organized the photographed documents into 2 piles, one for removal, another for items that would be kept but with specific pages or sections missing. The efficiency of their operation suggested this was not their first time manipulating the archive contents. As they prepared to leave, Thomas heard Camilla give final instructions. "Remember, the official record should show that these boxes contained only routine correspondence and public relations materials. Nothing sensitive, Nothing that could be construed as politically damaging. If anyone asks about missing documents, we'll simply say they were relocated to the private family collection for preservation purposes. Margaret sealed the boxes they were removing and made notations in the official archive log. Thomas realized with growing horror that they were creating a false record of what the archives actually contained. After they left, Thomas had spent hours wrestling with what to do. His position required him to maintain confidentiality about royal activities, but what he had witnessed seemed to cross legal and ethical boundaries. These weren't Camilla's personal documents to remove or alter. Many of them belonged to Prince William as Diana's heir, and some were part of the official historical record that historians and biographers relied upon for accuracy. Now, 3 days later, Thomas had made his decision. Prince William was scheduled to visit the archives today for his own review of his mother's papers. It was an appointment that had been on the books for months, arranged as part of William's preparation for a speech commemorating the 27th anniversary of Diana's death. Thomas had wrestled with the proper channels for reporting what he had seen. Going through normal royal household protocols would likely mean the information would be filtered through the same administrative structure that had allowed Camilla's activities to continue unchecked. He had considered contacting the keeper of the royal archives directly, but Margaret Thornfield had connections throughout that office. The most direct approach, Thomas had concluded, was to inform Prince William himself. As Diana's son and a second in line to the throne, William had both personal and constitutional authority to address potential mishandling of royal documents. Moreover, the documents in question directly concerned his mother and his own inheritance of her papers and effects. At 8:15, Thomas heard familiar voices in the main corridor. Prince William's security detail was conducting their advance sweep, preparing for the prince's arrival. Thomas positioned himself near the archive entrance, his heart pounding but his resolve firm. Prince William appeared at 8:30, dressed casually in a navy sweater and dark trousers. He moved with the easy confidence that came from a lifetime in these halls. But Thomas could see the underlying tension in his posture. Reviewing his mother's private papers was never easy for William, even after all these years. "Good morning, Thomas," William said, recognizing the guard who had been part of Windsor's security team throughout William's adult life. "How are things today?" This was the moment Thomas had been rehearsing. "Good morning, Your Royal Highness. Sir, if I might have a private word, before you begin your archive work. It concerns materials related to the late Princess Diana's papers." William's expression immediately became more focused. "Of course. Is there a problem with access or documentation?" Thomas glanced around to ensure they were alone, then spoke quietly but clearly. "Sir, I believe there has been unauthorized removal and alteration of documents from your mother's archive collection. I witnessed activities 3 days ago that I believe you should know about before you proceed with your review." The color drained slightly from William's face. What kind of activities? Thomas took a breath and began recounting everything he had seen and heard. He watched William's expression shift from surprise to anger to something harder and more determined. When Thomas finished his account, William was silent for nearly a full minute. "You're certain about what you heard regarding the content of these documents?" William asked finally. "Absolutely certain, sir. I heard specific references to letters about divorce proceedings, psychiatric evaluations, and documented concerns about safety threats. Queen Camilla specifically mentioned that you should never know these materials existed." William's jaw tightened. "And you witnessed them creating false records in the archive logs?" "Yes, sir. They documented the removed materials as routine correspondence and public relations items, when the actual content was clearly much more sensitive and personal." William was quiet again, but Thomas could see the wheels turning. The prince was not just processing this as a son learning about interference with his mother's legacy, but as a future king confronting a serious breach of constitutional and legal protocols surrounding royal archives. "Thomas, I want you to understand that what you've told me represents exactly the kind of integrity and service that the monarchy depends on. You've done the right thing by bringing this to my attention." William's voice carried the authority of his position, but also genuine gratitude. "I'm going to need you to document everything you witnessed in writing, and I may need you to provide formal testimony about these events." "Of course, sir. Whatever is needed." William looked toward the archive entrance, his expression grim but resolute. "Let's go see exactly what condition my mother's papers are in now. And Thomas, I want you present as a witness for whatever we discover." As they walked toward Archive Room 7, Thomas felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had done what his conscience demanded, but he understood that the consequences of his decision would ripple far beyond this morning's revelation. The royal family was about to confront a crisis that went to the heart of trust, legacy, and the preservation of truth within the monarchy itself. William paused at the archive room door, his hand on the handle. "Before we go in, I want you to know that regardless of what we find, your position here is secure. You've demonstrated the kind of loyalty that protects the institution, not just individuals within it." Then he opened the door, and together they stepped into a room that would change everything. The silence in Archive Room 7 was deafening as Prince William surveyed the chaos before him. What should have been meticulously organized boxes containing his mother's papers were now a scattered mess of partially empty containers, loose documents, and obvious gaps where materials had been removed. Thomas watched William's face as the prince picked up the first box, labeled Princess Diana, Personal Correspondence, 1997. The box, which according to the archive catalogue should have contained 47 items, now held fewer than 20 documents. The missing pieces weren't random selections either. Based on the remaining materials, it was clear that someone had systematically targeted the most sensitive and revealing content. William pulled out a letter his mother had written to her friend Rosa Monckton in early 1997. The letter discussed Diana's growing confidence in her post-divorce life and her plans for upcoming charitable work, but there was a handwritten note clipped to it that made William's hands shake. Original letter contained 3 additional pages discussing concerns about surveillance and feeling followed. Pages removed. Per QC instruction October 15, 2024. MT. The initials MT could only mean Margaret Thornfield, and QC obviously referred to Queen Camilla. "They're not even hiding what they've done," William said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They're documenting the removals like it's routine administrative work." Thomas pointed to another box that sat open on the table. "Sir, that's the one they spent the most time with when I observed them. It was labeled as containing psychiatric evaluations and medical consultations." William approached the box with visible reluctance. Even as an adult, reading about his mother's struggles with mental health during the divorce period was painful. But what he found was worse than painful. It was infuriating. The box contained only 2 documents, a routine medical clearance form for overseas travel and a basic fitness evaluation for participation in charity sporting events. But attached to the inside lid of the box was an inventory sheet that told a very different story. The original contents had included detailed psychological evaluations, private therapy session notes, and what appeared to be Diana's own written documentation of her fears and concerns during 1996 and 1997. One item on the missing list made William's blood run cold. Personal security assessment and threat analysis compiled by Princess Diana, including documented incidents and suspicious activities noted between January and August 1997. William sank into one of the archive room chairs, trying to process what this meant. His mother had been keeping her own record of potential threats and suspicious activities in the months leading up to her death. Not only had he never known this documentation existed, but someone had deliberately ensured he would never see it. "Thomas, you mentioned overhearing specific content about divorce proceedings. Where would those documents have been stored?" Thomas led William to a section of filing cabinets along the far wall. These contained what the catalogue described as legal and financial correspondence related to divorce settlement negotiations. When William opened the first drawer, he found it nearly empty except for copies of documents that were already part of the public record from the divorce proceedings. But there was evidence of much more. File folder tabs indicated there had been extensive correspondence between Diana and her legal team, private letters to William and Harry about the divorce situation, and what appeared to be Diana's personal journal entries about her feelings regarding Charles and Camilla during the divorce period. William found a file folder labeled Letters to William, Divorce Period. Inside was a single letter, dated March 1996, in which Diana expressed her love for William and assured him that the divorce would not affect their relationship. It was a touching letter, but according to the folder tab, there should have been 17 letters in the series. Attached to the remaining letter was another note in Margaret Thornfield's handwriting. Remaining 16 letters contained inappropriate commentary about HRH, Prince Charles, and future QC. Content could damage family relationships and public perception. Removed for family protection per QC instruction. William stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the castle grounds. "Family protection," he said bitterly. "They're calling this family protection. They've stolen my mother's voice, Thomas. They've taken away her ability to tell me, in her own words, what she was thinking and feeling during one of the most difficult periods of her life." Thomas remained respectfully quiet, understanding that William needed space to process the magnitude of what they were discovering. But William wasn't finished. "Show me the boxes they removed completely," William said. returning to the table with renewed determination. Thomas pointed to gaps in the shelving system where entire sections of Diana's papers had been housed. According to the archive system, these had included Diana's private diaries from 1996 and 1997, correspondence with international political figures, and detailed documentation of her humanitarian work that might have included sensitive information about global political situations. William consulted the master archive list, comparing it to what remained in the room. The pattern was clear and damning. Anything that might cast Charles in a negative light during the divorce, anything that showed Diana's growing independence and confidence, and anything that documented her concerns about her safety, had been systematically removed. But perhaps most troubling were the missing items related to Diana's relationships with her sons during this period. Letters she had written to William and Harry, documenting her fears about how the divorce would affect them and her hopes for their future, had been taken. These weren't state documents or materials that might affect the monarchy's public image. These were personal communications between a mother and her children. "They've stolen my inheritance," William said quietly. "Not financial inheritance, my emotional inheritance from my mother. Her thoughts, her fears, her hopes for me and Harry. They've decided I don't have the right to know what my own mother was thinking." Thomas watched as William pulled out his phone and began photographing the evidence of tampering, the empty boxes, the removal notes, the gaps in the filing system. The prince was methodically documenting everything they were finding, building a case that went far beyond family disagreement into potential criminal territory. "Sir, there's something else," Thomas said hesitantly. "Based on what I observed, this wasn't a one-time operation. Queen Camilla and Margaret Thornfield had a system, like they'd done this before. I suspect that if we checked other sections of the archives, we might find similar tampering with documents related to other sensitive royal matters." William looked up from his phone, considering this possibility. "Other sensitive matters? Documents related to the early days of your father's relationship with Queen Camilla, perhaps? Or materials that might shed light on the timeline of their relationship during your parents' marriage? If they were willing to tamper with Princess Diana's papers, they might have also altered documents that could reveal uncomfortable truths about their own history. The implications were staggering." If Thomas was right, then what they were looking at wasn't just theft of Diana's legacy, but a comprehensive effort to rewrite the historical record to present a more favorable version of Charles and Camilla's relationship. William was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing his options. As second in line to the throne, he had the authority to order a complete investigation into the archive management. As Diana's son, he had personal standing to pursue criminal charges for theft and destruction of property, but as a member of the royal family, he also had to consider the public relations implications of exposing this scandal. "Thomas, I need you to understand that what happens next may not be pleasant for anyone involved," William said finally. "But this cannot stand. If we allow this to continue, it sets a precedent that any royal can simply remove or destroy historical evidence that doesn't suit their narrative. That's not just wrong. It's dangerous to the institution of the monarchy itself." William pulled out his phone again, this time to make a call. Thomas heard him ask for Sir Edward Young, the private secretary to King Charles. The conversation that followed was brief but tense. "Edward, it's William. I'm at Windsor reviewing my mother's papers, and we have a serious problem. I need you to meet me here immediately, and I need you to bring the official procedures for archive tampering investigations." "Yes, that's what I said. Archive tampering. No, this cannot wait until next week. I need you here within the hour." After ending the call, William turned to Thomas with an expression that mixed gratitude with grim determination.
"You've opened a door that can't be closed, Thomas. But it's a door that needed to be opened."
"Are you prepared for what comes next?" Thomas straightened, feeling the weight of history settling on his shoulders. "Yes, sir. Whatever is needed to protect the truth." William nodded, then began the methodical work of cataloguing every piece of evidence they had found. The battle for Diana's legacy was about to begin, and it would test the very foundations of the modern royal family. The tension in the archive room was thick enough to cut when Sir Edward Young arrived at Windsor Castle exactly 53 minutes after William's call. The private secretary to King Charles moved with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades managing royal crises, but the expression on his face suggested this was unlike anything he had encountered before. Sir Edward was accompanied by Lady Victoria Hartwell, the keeper of the royal archives, and surprisingly, by James Morrison, the royal family's chief legal counsel. The presence of Morrison indicated that this situation had already escalated beyond a simple administrative matter into potential legal territory. Your Royal Highness, Sir Edward began formally, I've brought the individuals you'll need to make this matter official. But before we proceed, I must ask, are you certain about the allegations you're making? William gestured toward the evidence spread across the archive room. The empty boxes, the removal notes, the gaps in the filing system, and the photographs he had taken documenting everything. The evidence speaks for itself, Edward. This isn't a matter of allegation anymore. We have documented proof of systematic removal and destruction of historical documents. Lady Victoria approached the tampered boxes with the careful precision of someone who had devoted her career to preserving historical accuracy. Her face grew increasingly pale as she examined the removal notes and compared the current contents to the official archive catalogues. This is catastrophic, she said quietly. These documents weren't just royal family property, many of them were part of the official historical record. We have researchers, biographers, and historians who rely on the completeness and accuracy of these collections. If word of this tampering gets out, it will undermine the credibility of our entire archive system. James Morrison was taking detailed notes as Thomas recounted exactly what he had witnessed 3 days earlier. The legal counsel's questions were sharp and specific, designed to establish a clear timeline and identify all individuals involved in the document removal. Mr. Hartwell, you mentioned overhearing Queen Camilla specifically state that Prince William should never know certain documents existed. Can you recall her exact words? Thomas had been preparing for this question. She said, William must never know these exist. If he discovers that his mother had documented her fears about potential threats to her safety and that Charles knew about them, it could turn him against his father permanently. The silence that followed was profound. Morrison exchanged glances with Sir Edward, both men clearly understanding the implications of what Thomas had reported. If Diana had documented safety concerns and if Charles had known about them, the ramifications extended far beyond family dynamics into potential criminal negligence territory. William broke the silence. Edward, I want to know exactly who authorized Queen Camilla's access to these materials. The documents that were removed weren't general historical materials that any royal family member might review. These were personal papers that belonged to me as Diana's heir. Sir Edward consulted a folder he had brought with him. According to our records, Queen Camilla requested access to materials related to royal family history as part of her preparation for upcoming public duties related to charitable work. The requests were approved through normal channels because they appeared to be legitimate research for her role as Queen Consort. But nobody verified what she was actually doing with the materials once she had access, Lady Victoria said, her voice tight with professional outrage. Our access protocols assume that royal family members will maintain proper stewardship of historical documents. We don't typically monitor their activities once access is granted. William's expression was grim. That's going to change. But first, we need to determine the full scope of what's been taken or altered. Over the next 2 hours, the group conducted a systematic review of multiple archive sections. What they discovered was worse than any of them had imagined. The tampering extended far beyond Diana's personal papers into multiple areas of royal documentation. Documents related to Charles and Camilla's relationship during the 1970s and 1980s had been heavily edited. Letters and memos that might have provided evidence of their relationship continuing during Charles's marriage to Diana had been removed. Financial records related to Camilla's security and support during the years when she was not officially recognized had disappeared. Even more troubling, they found evidence of tampering with documents related to the immediate aftermath of Diana's death. Materials that might have shed light on the royal family's initial response to the tragedy, including any discussions about Camilla's role during that period, had been systematically removed. James Morrison was building a legal case with military precision. Your Royal Highness, based on what we're documenting here, we have grounds for criminal charges including theft, destruction of historical documents, and potentially fraud related to the falsification of archive records. But we also have a constitutional crisis, Sir Edward added grimly. Queen Camilla is the King's wife. Pursuing criminal charges against her would create unprecedented legal and political complications. William was silent for several minutes, weighing the competing considerations. The personal violation of having his mother's voice stolen was intense, but his responsibilities as future king required him to consider broader implications. What are our options? William asked finally. Morrison outlined 3 possible approaches. First, we could handle this as an internal royal family matter, demanding return of the materials and implementation of new security protocols, but avoiding public disclosure or criminal proceedings. Second, we could pursue full criminal prosecution, which would likely become public, and could severely damage the monarchy's reputation. Third, we could seek a middle ground, formal investigation with consequences for those involved, but structured to protect institutional stability. Before William could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Harry, his younger brother, calling from California. "Harry," William answered, putting the call on speaker so the others could hear. "You need to know what's happening here." "Actually, William, I think you need to know what's happening here." Harry's voice was tense. "I just received a very interesting call from someone claiming to be a journalist who says they have copies of removed documents from Mummy's archive collection. They are asking me to comment on letters she supposedly wrote about her fears regarding her safety." The room went dead silent. William felt the blood drain from his face as the full implications hit him. "Harry, where did this journalist say they obtained these documents?" "That's the interesting part. They claim they received them from a concerned member of the royal household who wanted to ensure the historical record remained complete." "William, someone leaked the removed documents to the press." William looked around the room at the faces staring back at him. The situation had just escalated beyond anyone's control. If the stolen documents were already in the hands of journalists, then the scandal was about to become public whether they wanted it to or not. Morrison was the first to speak. "We need to assume that multiple media outlets may have copies. If one journalist has them, others likely do as well. We're looking at potential publication within days or even hours." Sir Edward was already on his phone, presumably calling Buckingham Palace to alert them to the developing crisis. Lady Victoria looked like she might be sick, understanding that her life's work maintaining the integrity of the royal archives was about to be publicly questioned. William made a decision that surprised everyone in the room. "Harry, I want you to cooperate fully with that journalist. Answer their questions honestly. If these documents are going to become public anyway, I want our family's response to be complete transparency about what happened." "William," Sir Edward interjected, "that could be incredibly damaging to the monarchy's reputation." "Edward, what's damaging to the monarchy is allowing people to steal and destroy historical evidence to protect their own image," William replied firmly. "What's damaging is letting the public discover that we've been hiding the truth about systematic tampering with royal archives. What's damaging is creating a precedent that anyone in the royal family can rewrite history to suit their narrative." William turned to Thomas, who had remained quietly in the background during these exchanges. "Thomas, I want you to understand that you may be asked to provide testimony to investigators, journalists, and possibly parliamentary committees. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny?" Thomas straightened. "Yes, sir. What I witnessed was wrong, regardless of who was involved. The truth deserves protection." William nodded, then addressed the group. "Here's what's going to happen. Morrison, I want you to prepare a complete legal case documenting everything we found. I want criminal referrals prepared for everyone involved in the document tampering, regardless of their position in the royal family. Edward, I want a full investigation into our archive access protocols and immediate implementation of new security measures. Victoria, I want a complete audit of all royal archive materials to determine the full scope of tampering." "And Queen Camilla?" Sir Edward asked quietly. William's expression was steel. "Queen Camilla's access to the royal archives is permanently revoked, effective immediately. She is banned from any future access to historical documents or royal family materials. If she wants to research royal history, she can use the same public resources available to any other citizen." The room fell silent as the weight of William's decision settled over everyone present. Banning a queen consort from accessing royal archives was unprecedented in modern royal history. It was a decision that would send shockwaves through every level of the royal household and would undoubtedly create a permanent rift between William and his stepmother. But William was not finished. "I want that ban documented officially and communicated to every person with archive access responsibilities. I want it included in the written protocols so that future generations understand that even members of the royal family are not above accountability for preserving historical truth." As the group began to disperse to handle their various responsibilities, Thomas realized that his simple decision to speak up about what he had witnessed had triggered a chain of events that would reshape how the royal family handled transparency, accountability, and the preservation of historical truth. The battle for Diana's legacy was about to become a public reckoning that would test everything the monarchy claimed to represent. The story broke simultaneously across 3 major British newspapers, exactly 72 hours after William's discovery in the archives. The headlines were devastating. "QN Camilla accused of stealing Diana's final letters. Royal Archives scandal. Systemic destruction of historical documents. And William bans Camilla for life from royal archives." Thomas Hartwell found himself at the center of a media storm unlike anything he had ever experienced. His decision to speak up about what he witnessed had transformed him from an anonymous security guard into a key figure in one of the most significant royal scandals in decades. The leaked documents that Harry had been contacted about were even more explosive than anyone had initially realized. Diana's personal safety assessment, which Camilla had ordered removed, contained detailed accounts of suspicious incidents in the months before her death. She had documented cars following her, unusual phone calls, and what she described as deliberate attempts to intimidate me into silence about Charles and Camilla's relationship. Most shocking was a letter Diana had written to William just 6 weeks before her death, expressing her love for him and her hopes for his future, but also sharing her fears.
If something happens to me,
I want you to know that I documented everything I was seeing and experiencing. I don't want you to spend your life wondering about the truth. Everything I observed and recorded is in the archive files under personal security assessment. Promise me that if I'm not here to tell you these things myself, you'll find those documents and learn what I was trying to protect you from. William had never seen this letter because it had been among the first documents Camilla ordered removed. The public reaction was swift and intense. Outside Buckingham Palace, protesters gathered with signs reading, "Justice for Diana and protect our history." Social media exploded with demands for a full parliamentary investigation into the archive tampering and calls for criminal charges against everyone involved. King Charles found himself in an impossible position. His wife was accused of systematic theft and destruction of historical documents related to his late first wife. His heir had taken the unprecedented step of banning the Queen Consort from accessing royal archives. The constitutional implications were staggering. The emergency meeting at Buckingham Palace included Charles, William, Sir Edward Young, and for the first time in decades, constitutional lawyers from both the government and the opposition parties. The monarchy was facing questions about its commitment to historical transparency that went to the heart of its modern legitimacy. The public trust in the institution depends on our commitment to preserving truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable, William argued during the heated discussion. If we allow family members to manipulate historical records to protect their image, we're no better than authoritarian regimes that rewrite history to suit their purposes. Charles, looking older than his years under the stress of the crisis, struggled to defend his wife while maintaining his constitutional responsibilities. Camilla was trying to protect the family from unnecessary pain. Some of Diana's final writings were filled with paranoid theories that would have been hurtful to everyone involved. Quote, "Father, they weren't paranoid theories if the documents proved they were based on real incidents she was experiencing," William replied firmly. "And regardless, those were not her documents to remove. They were my inheritance from my mother, and she had no right to decide what I should or shouldn't know about my mother's final thoughts." The legal implications were becoming clearer as investigators dug deeper into the evidence. Margaret Thornfield, Camilla's private secretary, had begun cooperating with authorities and revealed that the document removal operation had been planned for months. Camilla had specifically targeted materials that might damage the public perception of her relationship with Charles or that might cast doubt on the official narrative surrounding Diana's final years. More disturbing revelations emerged when investigators discovered that some of the removed documents had been destroyed entirely, while others had been altered before being returned to the archives. Diana's personal diary entries had been edited to remove references to her relationship concerns and safety fears. Letters between Diana and her sons had been modified to eliminate passages where Diana expressed worry about how Camilla's presence might affect William and Harry's relationship with their father. Thomas found himself testifying before a parliamentary committee investigating the archive tampering. His clear, detailed account of what he witnessed provided the foundation for the criminal case being built against those involved. Mr. Hartwell, the committee chairman asked, "In your professional opinion, was this the first time such document tampering had occurred, or did you observe evidence of a pattern of behavior?" Thomas had prepared carefully for this question. "Based on the efficiency and organization I observed, and based on comments I overheard about previous locations of sensitive materials, I believe this was part of an ongoing systematic effort to control the narrative around royal family history. The public testimony was devastating for Camilla's reputation." Opinion polls showed that 78% of British citizens believed she should face criminal charges for the archive tampering. 62% supported William's decision to ban her from future archive access. International reactions were equally harsh. The French government, still sensitive about Diana's death in Paris, demanded a full investigation into whether any materials related to the accident investigation had been tampered with. The European Union's Committee on Historical Preservation expressed concerns about the implications for other royal archives across Europe. Prince Harry's decision to return to Britain to support his brother during the crisis marked a significant moment in their relationship repair. Harry's public statement was uncompromising. "Our mother's voice was stolen from us twice, first by her death, and then by those who decided we didn't deserve to hear her final thoughts and concerns. This cannot stand, regardless of family politics." The criminal investigation moved forward with startling speed. Margaret Thornfield was charged with theft, destruction of historical documents, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The charges against Camilla were more complex due to her constitutional position, but legal experts agreed that her role as queen consort did not provide immunity for criminal acts unrelated to her official duties. The most significant constitutional question centered on whether Charles had known about or approved of Camilla's activities. If the king had been aware of the systematic tampering with royal archives, it would raise questions about his fitness to serve as constitutional monarch. Sir Edward Young, under intense pressure from parliamentary investigators, revealed that Charles had been briefed on Camilla's archive access requests but claimed he had assumed they were for legitimate research purposes. However, investigators discovered email communications between Charles's office and Camilla's secretary that suggested more detailed knowledge of what was being removed and why. One email from Charles's assistant to Margaret Thornfield was particularly damaging. HM understands the sensitivity around certain materials from the Diana period and supports QC's efforts to ensure family privacy is maintained while preserving appropriate historical documentation. William's response to this revelation was swift and public. In a rare personal statement, he declared, "If my father had any knowledge of or involvement in the tampering with my mother's papers, then he violated not only his duties as king, but his responsibilities as a father. I cannot and will not accept any justification for denying me access to my mother's final thoughts and documented concerns." The constitutional crisis deepened when Parliament voted to establish a formal inquiry into royal archive management practices. For the first time in modern history, sitting members of the royal family would be required to testify under oath about their knowledge of and involvement in potential criminal activities. The inquiry's scope expanded beyond the Diana documents when investigators discovered evidence of tampering with materials related to other sensitive royal family matters, including documents about the abdication crisis, World War II correspondence, and materials related to colonial-era activities that might reflect poorly on the monarchy's historical role. Public pressure reached a breaking point when protesters surrounded Clarence House, Camilla's official residence, demanding her resignation from all royal duties. The crowds were peaceful but persistent, with many carrying photographs of Diana and signs reading, "Truth cannot be erased, and justice for history." The resolution came through an unprecedented series of decisions that would reshape the modern monarchy. King Charles, facing the choice between supporting his wife and maintaining the constitutional integrity of his reign, announced that Camilla would voluntarily relinquish all access to royal archives and historical materials permanently. She would also step back from any public duties related to royal history or the preservation of royal heritage. More significantly, Charles announced the establishment of an independent Royal Archives Oversight Committee, with members appointed by Parliament rather than by the royal family. The committee would have full authority to investigate any allegations of tampering with royal historical materials and would ensure that access protocols protected the integrity of the historical record. William, in accepting these measures, issued a statement that many viewed as a defining moment in his preparation for kingship. The monarchy's legitimacy in the modern era depends on our commitment to transparency and truth, even when that truth is painful or inconvenient. No member of the royal family, regardless of their position, is above the responsibility to preserve historical accuracy for future generations. Thomas Hartwell received a formal commendation from Parliament for his courage in exposing the archive tampering. More importantly to him, he received a personal letter from Prince William. "Your integrity and courage have helped ensure that my mother's true voice will be preserved for history. You have honored both your oath of service and your commitment to truth. The monarchy is stronger because of people like you." The criminal proceedings against Margaret Thornfield resulted in a conviction and a 2-year prison sentence. The charges against Camilla were resolved through a plea agreement that included formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, substantial fines paid to historical preservation organizations, and her permanent exclusion from any role in managing royal historical materials. Perhaps most importantly, all of the removed and altered documents were returned to their proper place in the archives, with additional protections to ensure their future security. Diana's complete papers, including her safety assessment and her final letters to her sons, were made available to William and Harry, allowing them to finally hear their mother's complete voice from her final months. The scandal fundamentally changed how the royal family approached historical transparency. New protocols required multiple independent witnesses for any archive access, complete video recording of all research sessions, and mandatory reporting of any requests for remove or relocate historical materials. The monarchy survived the crisis, but it emerged transformed. The public's understanding that even queen consorts were not above the law, and that future kings would prioritize historical truth over family comfort, actually strengthened public support for the institution. William's handling of the crisis was widely viewed as evidence of his fitness for his future role as king. For Thomas Hartwell, the security guard whose conscience sparked a constitutional crisis, life gradually returned to normal. He continued his duties at Windsor Castle, but with the knowledge that his decision to speak truth to power had helped preserve the integrity of British history and protected Diana's legacy for future generations. The archives crisis became a defining moment for the modern monarchy. Proof that in the 21st century, the royal family's commitment to truth and transparency would be tested not just by external pressures, but by their willingness to hold themselves accountable to the same standards of honesty and integrity they expected from their subjects. Diana's voice, nearly lost to manipulation and self-interest, had been preserved through the courage of one man who understood that some things are more important than keeping powerful people comfortable with their secrets. The truth, as it always does, had found a way to surface, ensuring that history would remember not just what happened, but who fought to preserve the record of what happened. In the end, William's ban of Camilla from the royal archives became more than just a consequence for wrongdoing. It became a symbol of the monarchy's commitment to placing historical truth above personal convenience, ensuring that future generations would inherit a complete and honest record of their royal heritage.